The question that I wanted to ask is about the increasing discussion around Israel maintaining more control and longer term control over large parts of Gaza. And Netanyahu talked about this 2 days ago, saying that we are increasing our occupation of Gaza basically from 60% to 70%. What could that mean for the Palestinians on the ground?
Already, we knew from the start that the Israeli occupation of Gaza was not going to stay at 50% or 63%. And now, as we see, it's 70%. And before long, it'll be 80%. You have now 2 million surviving people in the genocide now squeezed into this tiny strip within. I don't like to call Gaza the Gaza Strip, but you now have a strip inside a strip. And they are completely cut off from any of the borders, they're cut off from the world. And this is the whole idea, that they are being practically pushed into the sea, if you want, metaphorically. But also the fact that there is no humanitarian aid getting in. There's no food, there's nothing getting in. Like they say there is, I think there was 4,000 trucks in all, when that's probably needed on a daily basis. So now more and more and more are being pushed further away into these what they used to call safe zones. Well, none of them are safe zones. We saw only yesterday and the day before that they bombed a food bank, a food storage depot in northwestern Khan Yunis, I think Al Nam. And, this is a food storage depot. So you only have to ask, look, if the Israelis wanted to enable the Palestinian survivors to continue surviving, would they be bombing food storage depots? Well, no. So you don't really have to read between the lines to see what's happening here. But yes, I think eventually what will happen is that the whole of Gaza will be under full military control. And I think that the Israelis are looking for a way to resume, if you like, the genocide. And I say that carefully because the genocide never finished. There has never been a ceasefire. What ceasefire ever do you have where the Israelis are allowed to continue bombing and killing and maiming on a daily basis? There is no such thing as a ceasefire where you're allowed to continue bombing. So I think that this, renewing the genocide is what we have ahead of us. It may be on a more incremental path at the moment, but, there are daily casualties, but anything between 3 to 31 casualties per day, including children, including people in tents, in safe zones. So I think you can see what the trajectory is going to be. The Netanyahu is going to continue taking full military control of Gaza, and I think people have got to wake up to this.
Sarah, if the Israeli occupation's army's goal is to get 100% of the Gaza Strip and militarily occupying it, to what end do you think that is? And what are going to be the impacts that is going to have on the Palestinian there, practically and psychologically?
Well, psychologically, I think it goes without saying, look, this is a genocide. It's never finished. It's never stopped. And the whole idea was for Netanyahu to not implement any of the criteria in the ceasefire, to hold on to his very fragile political coalition, because the Israelis are going to go to elections later on in the year. So the whole idea was never to implement any of the criteria that was involved in said deal, which doesn't exist. So I think for the Palestinians, it's disastrous. I think that we will see a continuation of the bombing. We'll see an escalation of the bombing. We'll see an escalation of the death toll. And let's not forget that the 72,803, which I think it stands as now, is grossly underestimated, because that does not include the families that have been completely vaporized, where people missing have not been added to the list. So there's an estimated 10,000 children missing already. And I think the figures from the Lancet, the Guardian, Arena, where it's more like 500,000 people already killed, are far more accurate. So this is still a genocide. It's not stopping. It's not slowing. I think what's going to happen is you will see now it will increase. And if the Israelis are not going to abide by the original criteria of the peace process, if you like, that never was, then they're certainly not going to abide by any other deals made. So really what we're looking at is full military control of Gaza. I think that's quite pessimistic, but I think it's the truth, it's the reality. And I think I'd like to see world leaders wake up to this fact. Does it take a flotilla to be brutalized in order for the United Nations to suddenly put the Israelis on the world's worst sexual predators? That should have been done decades ago. So you can see how the United Nations is dragging its heels. You can see how America is so fully invested in this genocide, and all 195 other states in the world. They're all somehow participating to facilitate this genocide and enable it to continue, even just by transporting weapons, or whether they're taking other military hardware, allowing the Israelis to use their roads and use their ports to get missiles and munitions into the area. All countries are facilitating this, even the apartheid-free zones, even the countries that say that they're implementing sanctions. Well, you know, they're very limited sanctions. We should have seen this years ago, and that there are no sanctions really against the Israeli regime to prevent what's coming, and that's a full-scale genocide.
That's right. Sarah, they say that the children in Gaza never get PTSD because the trauma never finishes. But regarding the aid, Israeli officials are saying that more aid is entering Gaza than ever, while humanitarian organizations are saying the exact opposite. They are warning about severe shortages in the Gaza Strip. Why do we continue to see such different accounts of the situation right now?
I think the Israelis have just got hold of the narrative. We know from people on the ground that the humanitarian aid, the food, the fuel to keep the hospitals running is simply not getting into the enclave. We know that it's not getting there. And if it does, it comes through Israeli militias. And also, what has been supplied in the past is just not nutritious food. It's like cans of Coke and sweets and things that they know people cannot actually survive on. So, you know, we've known for ages that the humanitarian aid isn't getting in. We've had even caravans parked up outside waiting to be taken in. They've always been denied by the Israelis. And now the Palestinians are pushed so far away from the actual borders that this stuff would have to travel through an Israeli owned or occupied military area in order to get to the Palestinians, by which most of it will have been taken. So no, there is not enough food getting in. We're going to have another engineered famine, or a continuation. I have to be careful how I phrase things. It's a continuation of an Israeli engineered famine. This is just the next stage of it. And it's ongoing. And, you know, really, world leaders, you can tell that they are colluding in this because nothing is being done about it. So there are conflicting stories, because there's the Israeli narrative and then there's the facts from the ground, what's coming from the Palestinians. And let's forget that the Israelis murdered over 270 odd journalists to prevent news like this getting out, to prevent us learning that the humanitarian aid was not available. That comes from journalists, that comes from even amateur journalists, of whom have all been killed. And by not letting international journalists into Gaza, that means that there is a difficulty getting the truth out and getting people to believe it. So the Israeli narrative is often the one that wins, but it is not the truth. And if that was the case, people would not be starving. There are children who are waiting for medical treatment who will not survive without the medical facilities which are being denied. So this is another facet of genocide, where you create a situation where the public cannot survive because they don't have the medicines, they don't have the right food, and they don't have the right access to medical facilities. It's just another facet of genocide, and it eventually will bring along a lot more deaths, secondary deaths, which may not even be counted in the original death toll. Another way that the Israelis can manage to keep the numbers down.
That's right. Sarah, when it comes to the humanitarian aid, there are so many different so-called analysts who are critical of the humanitarian aid that is shipped, that is actually at the very least tried to be shipped to the Gaza Strip, saying that when you know that the Israelis are going to intercept and capture you and then bring you to the Israeli prisons, why do you keep doing that? What is your response to that critique?
The only way at the moment to get humanitarian aid to the Palestinians is by these Gaza flotillas, ships, boats, private ships. That is actually the only way, and they have to keep trying. And what it does is, if anything, raises awareness. It puts Gaza back in the news. It's a human attempt at solidarity. Yes, the Israelis intercept it, but I think the world is waking up to the brutality that the Israelis are prepared to mete out against international MPs, some of them delegates, doctors, nurses, students. It doesn't matter who you are, what country you come from. You could even be kidnapped in Crete. You could even be kidnapped in Greek waters. This enables the public to see that the Israelis will attack you. You are a target if you support Gaza in any formal manner. These things have to be known, and they have to be tried and tested the difficult way. But the world solidarity, we have to give the Palestinians hope. We have to keep trying to get to Gaza with humanitarian aid. Some of that was tipped overboard. Some of it does wash up onto the beaches, very little. But the point of it is to show that the world is behind Gaza. The flotillas will keep coming. People will keep trying. And if we give up and sit back, then we're relying on the Israelis to feed people that they are also trying to kill. And so you can see that it's an oxymoron. We know the Israelis are committing a genocide. We have to do everything we can. And the flotilla, when you see that there are 500 participants, there's 45 different countries on board ships doing their best to get food to Gaza, that is maybe it's a symbolic action of solidarity, but it's a very, very essential one. And the flotillas will keep coming, and they'll keep coming. There is no sign that anybody is going to stop their attempts to get food to Gaza, because it is legal. It is our legal right, and it is a legal right to get humanitarian aid to people suffering in, if you want to call it, a war zone. And to impede it in any way is a breach of the Geneva Convention. So keep the flotillas coming, keep food getting there as much as we can.
That's right. Sarah, Francesca Albanese has once again come under political pressure and sanctions over her comments and reporting in what is happening in Gaza. What do you make of the reaction to her work?
Do you know, the family, I think it was her sister and her husband who had said that, you know, this is the sanctions against Francesca Albanese for being a vocal critic of the Israeli regime, a vocal critic of the genocide, which is correct. And you have to have somebody speaking out against the Israeli genocide, but to punish the people that are actually doing this criticism and actually trying to make change is ridiculous. Now, I think it was a federal judge, Richard, I forget his name now, Richard Leon, I think maybe. Apparently, the judge who made the ruling that the sanctions against Francesca Albanese were unlawful because they violated her human rights, he's also been sanctioned for making that ruling. And so what's happened now, the sanctions have been, the non-sanctions have been revoked. It's actually quite difficult to say. So she's now re-sanctioned. And in a sense, this reflects what's happening to people critical of the Israeli regime across the board. Because, you know, activists and journalists alike, we've all been arrested at points because we speak out a bit against Gaza. And this is what the Israelis are trying to clamp down on. This is what they're trying to silence. So she is, if you like, representative of a lot of people who've had their bank accounts seized by Visa, because Visas are owned by America, and America wants to silence people who are actively working to end a genocide, one of the most heinous genocides in history. And in order to do that, they have to silence the people at the top. But there's a lot of people who've been sanctioned likewise. And I think with Francesca Albanese, she is probably the biggest vocal critic we have at the moment, and a very important one. So, yeah, it's a very unfair attack. It's hideous, and I hope the people in the world rise up for her too.
That's right. Sarah, the UN has recently included Israeli actors in reports concerning sexual violence and conflict. Critics say these conversations should have happened much longer ago. Why do you think this issue has taken so long to gain wider international attention right now?
I think I'm going to have to say it. It's a very difficult subject. The problem is because people are white. What's happened is international foreign activists, delegates, MPs, and even the sister of the Irish President Catherine Connolly, I think Margaret Connolly, her name is. These people have been brutalized, and sexual violence has been used against foreign activists and delegates and humanitarians. That's kind of kick-started, I think, the United Nations into thinking, oh God, it's happening to all of us. Maybe we should do something. But that, and I think, sorry, I can't remember her name, Noah from Novara Media, I think she is, Dropsite News. She very eloquently put, the world is horrified about the sexual violence meted out against humanitarians, international humanitarians from 45 different nations. Could that not have been extended to the Palestinians who've been enduring it for years, for decades? And there's been enough reports to know about the sexual violence being used inside Israeli jails while Palestinians have been incarcerated, and towards children as well. This, in 2026, this should have happened maybe 80 years ago. So yeah, it's taken the United Nations a very, very long time to list and correctly list the Israelis as sexual predators. But it should have happened a long time ago. It hasn't been extended to the Palestinians. It's a form of discrimination, in my view. And as Kieran Andrio, I think he said, maybe somebody foreign has to die in order for people to understand just how serious the situation is. Well, if we look at Rachel Corrie and Tom Herndl and also James Miller, I think the journalist, actually international people have already died at the hands of the Israelis, but maybe it's the numbers of the delegates coming across in ships that have been brutalized in a large amount that I think has horrified the world. And yes, sanctions, let's hope, but I wouldn't put your money on it. But it's horrifying that this concern and condemnation has not happened for the Palestinians. We had to wait for it to happen to international foreign activists.
And my final question to you, Sarah, it is: what realistic avenues do you see that are still existing for reducing tensions and protecting civilians at this point?
We have to end the genocide. I think it's quite simple. There has to be an end to the genocide. The world leaders have to stand up and want there to be an end to genocide. And the problem is with this, they're all so highly invested in the weapons industry. They're also they're completely complicit as far as, all different types of military hardware. And they're so invested in the genocide continuing. But, the people have to continue rising up. We, at the end of the day, have to not give up. Everybody has to keep speaking about Gaza. And let's hope, at some point somebody sees sense. But if we don't act quickly, then we have more human catastrophe on our hands. And these are our brothers and sisters across the water. This is an Israeli project that's going to expand. It already has expanded into Lebanon. It will expand into other areas already. And if we look at Crete and Greece, it already had expanded into Europe. The Israelis are claiming they own the Mediterranean. It needs people to wise up and wise up quickly. And we need to save the lives of our comrades in Palestine as fast as possible. And that means we have to say no to genocide, recognize it for what it is, and acknowledge it for what it is, and say no more.